Hi, Jamie Bishop with Soul Heart Entertainment here to talk about toes. Let's get right into it. Let me see if I can fix that. It's weird. All right. For some of you, hi, hon. For some of you, you already know this, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Just go over the toe reading map so that you can see a little bit about the basics of toe reading. So at some point, I'm gonna have these images printed in reverse so that you can see the, hey Courtney, how are you? So glad you're here. So that you can see everything in, not backwards, which I think it is for you, but just to go over the meaning of each of the toes before we get started on doing some sample toe readings. For each of the feet, the toes themselves mean the same thing, but they mean something different from foot to foot in the sense that the right foot is our yang or external self, and the left foot is our yin or internal self. So the big toe is based on ether and how everything connects. So it's about the big picture or our destiny. The second toe, the pointer finger toe, is the air toe, which is about communication and how things, it looks like I have somebody who wants to join. Uh-oh, there go my cats. They will take care of themselves. They always do. The air toe is about communication and creativity and analytical behavior. And the middle toe, which you can see it in the middle finger, is the fire toe. It's all about how we take action and about our temperament. So how our temper shows up in the world in relation to our action. The ring finger toe is the second to last one. It's the water toe. It's how we either go with the flow or don't go with the flow. And it's all about the relationships in our lives. And then the baby toe is the only one that's different from foot to foot. On the right foot, it's about prosperity and abundance, which is how we show up in the world. On the left foot, it's about our faith and trust in ourselves, basically in our higher selves. And there's some other things on here about the cut. You can see the color, I think. The colors relate to the chakras and how the chakras show up and all that kind of stuff. But I think that that's maybe more. Oh, hey, Kim, you made it. I'm so glad. Fabulous. So, shameless plug here. I have this stunningly beautiful necklace. Let me put my face up into the camera that my very good friend Kim created for me. It's so gorgeous. Anyway, so there it is. I know you can't really see it all that well, but there we go. Woo! And I have my little, my wings on the necklace, and it's a nice bold necklace because it's such a beautiful piece. Anyway, yay! Kim's fantastic. If you have any jewelry that you want done, or just, goodness, check her jewelry out. Okay, so back to toe reading. So the other thing that I'll show you about this toe reading map is that when our toes lean in toward the big toe, that's about the past and stories that we hold on to. And when they lean out toward the baby toe, that's about future. That's about future thoughts, feelings, and emotions. So let's get straight to toe reading before I delve any further into all of the other exciting pieces of the puzzle, which are really easy for me to get. It's really easy for me to get into that teaching mode around telling you everything there is to know and completely overwhelming you with all of the information because there's so much information that shows up in the feet. So I'm just gonna try to find a really good example of toes that Okay, so when I look at these toes right here, I have left and right on the feet just so that you guys can tell. I know that it's backwards for you, but bear with me. All right, so when we're talking about the right foot, we're talking about our external self and how those thoughts, feelings, and emotions show up in the world around us. When we're talking about the left foot, we're talking about how we feel about our journey, how we feel about walking our highest purpose path in life, and how that shows up. So as we said, each of the toes means something. So in this case, there's a very distinct difference between the left foot and the right foot when it comes to this big toe. Can you tell? What do you think that is? If you can type it in, what do you see that's different from the left foot to the right foot as far as that big toe is concerned? Anybody have some thoughts? Okay, I'll go on, and if somebody wants to write a comment about the difference that you see, let me know, because I'm always fascinated at how accurate you are, even though you don't know how to toe read. The space, absolutely. So Kim, Jean, completely. Courtney said it's turned in on the left foot. It is. She's an astronaut, haha. You're so silly. She might be. Hey, what do I know? So there's a very distinct difference between the space between the two toes, okay? So what that tells me is that when it comes to how she feels inside, she might be a little bit, or she might feel like she's more closed off than she actually shows up in the world. She might feel like she has, like she wants people to be around her, like she needs a little bit of extra TLC. Whereas when out in the real world, she kind of comes across as independent and completely like she can handle it all, she can do it all that kind of good stuff. And then the leaning out, that's a really good observation there, Courtney. So what happens is you can see that right at this knuckle, this particular one turns out toward the future. So there was something that happened. Another piece of the puzzle as far as how to read toes go is where the toe meets the foot is right here, right now. It's present moment, present tense. Out at the tip of the toe, on the timeline of the toe is, I'm sorry, it's the opposite. I don't know why I said that. Where it meets the toe is where we were born. Where the tip of the toe is where we are right this moment, as far as our thoughts, beliefs, and feelings and emotions around the destiny in this particular case, because we're talking about her big toe. So where her big toe meets her foot, it kind of comes off straight, and then all of a sudden it kind of shoots off to the future, right? So what that tells me is that about a third of her life ago, maybe a little bit over a third of her life ago, something pretty dramatic in her life happened that took her off the destined path, because she had been on the destined path through her whole youth, it would appear. And then something happened and it kind of threw her off, and it pushed that toe a little bit toward the future. So what that means is that her thoughts, feelings, and emotions are very future oriented in when it comes to how she feels inside herself. Now, if you look at the right toe, it's pretty straight. There's not a whole heck of a lot of curving to it. The curving, or the appearance of curving, and I'm using my quote fingers, the appearance of curving has more to do with that there's more padding on the interior side of the nail versus the exterior side of the nail. So when I see more padding on the nail, what we're talking about is there's a lot of future thoughts there, but because it's coming straight forward, she's basically, what it comes down to is that she's a fantastic planner when it comes to the big picture. She might get lost on the details, so she would need a partner or somebody who is a little bit more detail oriented than she is, because she sees the big picture really, really easily and well, and she's really good at planning for the big picture. But when it comes to getting things done right here, right now, and getting things done today, as opposed to making plans for the future, it can be a challenge for her. So, yeah. Does anybody want to ask a question as far as, like, is something burning, you know, in your mind that you want to know about toe reading, or that you're just curious about in your life, that maybe I can show you how it shows up on the toes, so that you can look down at your own toes and see where you are in relation to whatever it is that you're thinking about. Courtney says, I'm adding that to my list. Let me scroll down. Of requirements for a partner. I know, right? I totally get it. I am right there with you, Courtney. Yeah, but it's, you know, isn't that interesting that you could literally have your significant other whip out their feet and you could see it right then and there, and you could tell whether that person is a big picture thinker or whether they're a detail person. I love that. I think that that's really, really neat. So on this picture, I'm going to go back to, am I going to go back to that picture if I can find it? I have so many pictures of feet right here. I love feet. All right, so let me see here. Where did they go? Oh, well. Oh, here they are. Okay. So, when it comes to big picture thinking, she's fantastic at the big picture thinking. When it comes to detail oriented, here's the probably the biggest challenge that this person comes up against. And that is that her big toenail, and I don't know if you can kind of see, yes, Courtney, I'll get to the baby toes. Hi, Janice, thanks for joining. So glad you're here. Okay, so see how her toenail kind of, it narrows toward the tip, right? It's a little bit wider at the bottom and it kind of narrows toward the tip. Okay, so what that means in relation to the big picture for this person is that even though she sees the big picture, she's very pinpointed about what that looks like for her. So, she, you know, if she's looking for a significant other, maybe she has a list of what the qualities that person needs to have that are deal breakers, or that they absolutely are required for her to be involved with that person. If she's developing a project, she would have a very, very specific to-do list. So even though I know I said she's not detail-oriented, it's more like she is detail-oriented. It's more like she needs to delegate all those details to somebody else, because she's not gonna feel satisfied in doing those little tasks. She's gonna feel much, much greater about making the plan of action and then giving it to somebody else to follow through with, right? So this is somebody who's a perfect CEO of their own business. Does that make sense? But they probably had to learn a little bit about delegating as they learned more about what they can and cannot handle in their life. Okay. So, oh, you can relate to that. Excellent. I don't doubt it. Okay, so with the baby toes, I'm wondering if this is the right foot to talk about baby toes on. You know what? I'm gonna use these feet to talk about baby toes, because there's a really cool little tattoo on this gal's feet. I don't have a pen to write left and right on these, but this is her right foot. Okay, this is her right foot. This is how she's showing up in the world around her. This is her left foot, so that's her internal self. Okay, there's a really sweet little tattoo right here. So at some point, she was in a relationship that she needed to acknowledge and highlight and really dedicate herself to being an advocate for that person. And that's where, you know, if I were to ask her what was going on in your life when you got that tattoo, who were you being most affected by? What was going on when it came to your relationships specifically? Because it's right along that relationship toe grid, okay? When it comes to the baby toes, the reason why I chose this picture is because she has really straight up and straightforward baby toes. And I don't doubt for 1 second that she's worked really hard to get them that way. Most baby toes, let me see, look something more like this, where they're kind of bent over, they're almost hiding underneath the relationship toe. That first one that I showed you is very much like that as well. So they're almost, you know, folded over. So I show you these feet because I want to highlight the idea that when you start with toes that are folded over, if you will, where the padding is kind of underneath the relationship toe, you're talking about somebody who needs to learn to stand on their own 2 feet. And so I happen to know this girl. Well, I happen to know most of these people. Some of them are advertisements that I came across, but the mass majority of these toes are from past toe readings. Hey, Catherine, so glad you're here. Thanks for joining. So when it comes to these toes, she's worked really, really hard to show up, to be seen, to feel heard, to have faith and trust in herself, and to not allow that to escape who she is and what she's about. Whereas when I'm looking at, let's do these toes. When I'm looking at these toes right here, you can kind of see that they really hide. They're almost buried underneath that relationship toe. And this one kind of, it almost bubbles up and then it kind of takes a dive to the floor, right? So when I see that, and when you look down at your feet, and if you see that kind of thing, where, you know, the questions that you'll want to be asking yourself are, where can I stand on my own 2 feet more solidly? Where in my life can that happen? Where can I make room for that to happen for myself? You know, sometimes it's as simple as taking a bath. Sometimes it's going for a walk. Sometimes it's just allowing yourself to have you time. That's it. Nobody else, no interruptions, even if it's only for 10 minutes. That's huge for some people. I remember when I had a toddler and, you know, I'm married to a pilot. He's gone a lot. So when I was the sole caregiver for our child, it took all of my time, effort, and energy, and I didn't get downtime for me ever, except for when she slept. And then if I didn't sleep when she slept, that means that I was overtired or that I didn't get enough sleep. So if I took that, yeah, anyway, but that's part of the story. That's part of the learning curve. Hey, Shannon. Oh, yay, you're here. Thank you for joining. Kim, let's see. Or does this mean we are being smothered by our relationship? Okay, so to a degree, obvious, you know, when you look at a toe like this, as you describe it, believe it or not, those are the words that you would use for yourself. So if you feel like the baby toes are being smothered by the relationship toes, then your faith, trust, and your prosperity and abundance are being smothered by your relationships. Does that make sense? So again, until there's a very fine line between dependence, codependence, and interdependence. Okay, the goal, I think, in most relationships, unless you want to be a monk and you want to be completely reliant only on yourself, the goal in most of our relationships is to be interdependent, which means that we complement each other as far as where the relationship is, how it feels for us. So if it feels like it's smothering you, where can you take a step back? Where can you allow your significant other time for themselves, and then respond by asking for time for yourself in response, right? Or demanding it. Sometimes it's interesting. When we're talking about relationships, there's always two very different ideas of what that looks like involved, right? So the communication piece of that is so important. Okay, so I'm gonna use these same toes on the purple background to illustrate where this person is coming at from the communication perspective, okay? Communication toe is this second toe. And I remember that, or when I first was learning, I remembered that because I think that most, you know, you kind of communicate with your pointer finger like you, right? If you're not sitting back and remembering that we are the creators of our universe, and every time we point a finger out there at somebody else, we are really pointing 4 fingers back at ourselves. So just a metaphor for thought. Oh, thank you, Katie. The Catherine's throwing me off for some reason. Thank you very much. Oh, so sweet. She says I look beautiful. It's always nice to hear. Okay, so when it comes to communication for this person who, I wouldn't say smothered, okay? I wouldn't say smothered. I would maybe say she's codependent. I would maybe say that okay, so if this is the right foot and this is the left foot, she probably doesn't feel as prosperous as she wants to, okay? So her prosperity and abundance, which is the baby toe, is very connected to her relationship toe. So she probably doesn't make as much money as her husband. She probably doesn't have as much self-worth maybe as her husband, right? On the faith and trust side, we're talking about somebody who gives a lot, maybe more than, not to should on anybody, but maybe more than she should. She gives, but then there's a certain amount of resentment that comes when the toe turns. It's almost like it's falling over on its side and just giving up. I kind of see that in the toe that curls over. Is like, it's just frustrating. It gets obnoxious. She always feels like she's putting forth all the effort, and maybe a little bit of resentment around not having somebody else put as much effort as she feels she's putting into. And because it's connected to that relationship toe, that's where that relationship comes into play in that respect. Now, perspective is a big deal, right? Perspective on relationships and who's giving what. And my husband and I argue all the time about, I feel like I have so much burden of upkeeping the house and doing all the things that I do. And he's like, I contribute too. Acknowledge that. So when I step back from my story around that I'm doing it all, I really do acknowledge that he is contributing just as much, if not a complete equal amount, maybe even sometimes more. So when that happens in my life, it's interesting how the shift in feeling more abundant and feeling more well cared for and feeling pampered and like just start to recognize all the little itty bitty things that your significant other does for you when your toes are kind of bent over like that. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Let's see. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about let's talk about these toes. If somebody were to describe what these toes look like they're doing, what would that look like to you? Anybody have any input on that? I'll hold it up one more time. Painful. That's a great descriptor word. Okay, so there is a lot going on here, and there is a lot of, I think pain is a really good observation, Katie. Hiding, yes, absolutely. Free-spirited, sure. I mean, isn't it interesting that of all of these feet, these are the only ones that I have in the air. So these are not connected with the earth, right? So I'm wondering if connecting with the earth might serve her well, because maybe she gets caught up in her head a lot and or in the spiritual guidance, which is wonderful to be caught up in the spiritual guidance. But if you don't bring that back down to earth and use it for the greater good, it just stays in those ethers and it stays circling. And to get it to come down to earth, you need to literally ground yourself in the earth. So something that I learned about, I guess it was about 3 years ago, was something called earthing. And earthing is this idea that if you think about how little most of society, especially those of us who live in cities, connect with the earth, it's kind of scary. It's actually kind of sad. The earth is truly a healing source for us. The amount of, I always think of a plant. Like, we are plants of this universe, of this earth in our own way. We are life forms, right? And without being able to root ourselves in the earth on some level, in some way, like I just picture going out to the grass and just spreading your toes in the grass. Sometimes that just feels so good. Just even connecting with the soil and the dirt in the backyard. I mean, it doesn't even have to be grass. So I'll tell you this story. When I was we were actually driving across the country to move to California. It was about a year ago. And we stopped at my mom's house, and I was moving some stuff around in her backyard, and she has this beautiful coyote sculpture that's made of metal that's out in the element all the time, right? And as most of you know, Scottsdale, Arizona is pretty darn hot this time of year. So I was out there messing around with this metal, and my fingers started to feel the heat from it a little too intensely, and it sort of slipped. Well, a piece of it snagged my leg, and I mean, I kid you not, it was a good solid 4-inch, maybe even 5-inch gash in my leg, where it was, rusted metal. So I I'm not a panicker when it comes to, thank goodness, I'm not a panicker when it comes to injuries. So I instantly went to the sink. I instantly scrubbed it, which is interesting to me because it never hurts me when I scrub that kind of stuff. But I scrubbed it. And then Jacelyn and I, about 10 minutes later, went outside of my mom's house because it's, concrete. And we went out into the neighborhood's little grassy area where it's probably full of dog pee and who knows what else. But we went out there, I put my feet in the grass, in the grassy area, and I just sat there. And I sat there for 10 minutes while I just kind of prayed to Mother Earth to heal this wound quickly, healthfully, with no adverse effects, because, good God, that could have been seriously bad thing. I don't know when the last time I had a tetanus shot was. So I went out there, I did that, I grounded myself, I had my feet kind of wrestling around in the grass. I basically prayed, if that's the right word. And I kid you not, I have not even a scar from that event. And it so easily could have been a gash for the rest of my life. So if you have any scars, and especially if they're fresh wounds, or know anybody who does that, I definitely highly recommend getting out into Mother Earth and just asking for her to help heal you. But back to these toes. I told you that story to tell you this one. So when it comes to toes like these, what I see in these toes is somebody who's been through a boatload. They have experienced a lot of drama and trauma in their lives, and they have held on for dear life, literally. It's, not to turn anybody off, but it's referred to in toe reading as the spiritual suicide toe, which means that, hey, Dogma, oh, so glad you're here. So when the toe, especially when the toe at the main knuckle, which I am not remembering the name of right now, when it curves out and turns away from the center, kind of like this. I know that a lot of you have known people who have had surgeries in order to try to correct that. What those toes are saying is that that person has been severely taken off of their destined path, okay? Especially because it's their big toe. And so usually it comes down to them getting that corrected when they're a full-grown adult, right? Hopefully they're in a place in their lives where they're willing to accept change, where it's a big dramatic thing to get this foot surgery, right? And hopefully they're in a frame of mind where they can accept a new path for themselves, maybe a higher purpose path, right? So when I went to my final level, which is the master level of the toe reading course, we had a podiatrist who was in class with us. And the classes are very small, or were very small. I'm not sure how big they are nowadays. But at the time when I was there, they were fairly small classes, about, let's say, 8 to 15 people, depending on which class it was. The less level classes had a lot more people, but the master class was pretty intimate. And so this podiatrist shared with us that her success rate with surgery was only 70%, okay? To me, that seems really, really like a low success rate. That's like 1 in 3 people it doesn't work for. That's a really high percentage to me. Now, she turned around and said, that's an extremely high success rate in the podiatry industry. So she happened to have a really good success rate with her surgeries. But being in this toe reading class, she obviously wanted to have an even higher success. Courtney says, I'm surprised it's that high. Yeah, she said it's not that high for most doctors, that she happens to have a pretty high success rate. Probably because she listens to her patients and wants to correct. Let me go back to the very beginning just quickly. Toe reading is this idea that our thoughts, feelings, and emotions show up the way that our toes do. So when your toes are off track, and specifically when they're that far off track, you have to correct that stuff in your head before anything physically can be fixed in your body, right? Dogma happens to be an acupuncturist. So I know she can totally and completely relate to this, that when she spends the time to talk with her patients about what's going on with them in their head, I guarantee that the success rate in the practice is that much higher, right? Yeah, I know. True story, right, Dogma? Okay, so in these toes, when and if this person ever were to have surgery to put those toes to correct those toes. Now, what's really interesting to me is that I've seen toes this out of whack, where, I mean, it almost looks like she's grabbing onto something, right, with her feet. I've seen them change instantly when I'm sitting with somebody. I've seen them straighten out. I've seen them loosen up. So toe reading is pretty fucking fantastic. Excuse my language. I just can't help it. It's that powerful. But so if she were to have surgery on these toes, the success rate potential is really low, unless the doctor unless she is in a place of spiritual healing, unless she's going through the depth, if you will, of why the toes ended up this way in the first place. It's no mistake that our toes are referred to as our soul, or that our feet are referred to as our soul. It doesn't matter that it's spelled different. It has that same energy to it, the soul and the soul. So anyway, point being, this podiatrist came back. I continued my education into reflexology, and I ended up seeing her in the hallway about a year later. And I said to her, oh my gosh, you were in my master toe reading class. Tell me, how has your practice been going since you learned what you learned in the toe reading class? And she said, Jamie, you'll never believe it. I have a 95% success rate. She said, it's blowing my competition out of the water. The doctors can't explain why I'm having such great success. And it like gives me head to toe goosebumps, because it's just so amazing how connected our thoughts, feelings, and emotions are to every dis-ease we have in our bodies. Because we hold that stuff, we hold it. It means so much to us when we are in a space of discomfort. And so we hold it. And when we're little kids and trauma happens to us, and we hold it for lots and lots and lots of years, it ends up looking like we're holding on for dear life. It ends up looking like arthritis and that kind of stuff. So that spiritual suicide toe is the toe that just tells you and your patients, Dogma, and anybody else who works with somebody in a coaching aspect, if they have toes that are off track, you need to get to that emotional source of where they went off track. And even just a simple conversation around what that looks like can completely change the outcome of your practice with them. Because releasing that energy, and instead of holding on to it, I think of these toes as we're holding on to it so tight. And that's kind of what I see when I look at these toes, is there's so much energy being held onto so tight that it's like when they finally release it, they literally can take a deeper breath, right? So anyway, I hope that was information that will help you guys. If you have any quick questions, let's wrap it up, and I can talk about one more thing. Tell me what you guys want to talk about. Those baby toes. Should I go back to the baby toes? Okay, so one more thing that I'm going to point out with the baby toes, okay? On this foot, you see there's kind of a little bit of extra padding right there, right? There's a little bit of extra padding on the right foot, but a lot more on the left foot. It almost has enough space to add another little tiny digit, right? What that usually means is their lymph nodes, their lymphatic system is on overdrive, okay? Which means that they're probably in a state of anxiety or stress a lot of the time. However, when they accept and tap into their intuition around what's going on in their faith and trust, so having faith and trust in their own intuition, it is, sorry, I just got a text. When their faith and trust, when it's being challenged, or when they acknowledge it and they bring it into that space of intuition and having faith and trust in their intuition, you will see that their lymphatic system releases 100 times easier. So that's more food for thought. There's so much more, but I think we're gonna leave it there. In order to adjust and change toes and adjust and change thoughts, self-care and tapping into your intuition is so important. So I welcome you guys to make sure that you take a few seconds. It doesn't even take that much time. Like when you think of somebody meditate, or when I think of somebody meditating, I think of them sitting there for minutes and minutes and minutes, sometimes even hours, right? It doesn't take that long. 30 seconds is enough. Just taking time to take a few nice, good, deep breaths and tapping into the light source that is within you, that also taps into the God source out there. So taking that time is so super important, and just allowing yourself to be the intuitive guide that you were meant to be in the world. So awesome, cool. Until next week, definitely send me pictures and or questions if you have anything that you want to ask about. And I'll connect with you guys on Tuesday next week at 6 p.m. California time. So 6 p.m. Tuesdays. Thank you so much for being here tonight, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.